Yo, 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 yo. Welcome to season 3 of Open for Discussion. I'm your boy, C. Maurice Ball, and today I have a young man on here that is phenomenal. He's out changing the world. His whole focus and purpose is to get men to be better men. And he is doing an amazing job, and he has an amazing reach, and he is out here in these streets doing the work instead of just talking about the work. So, but before I introduce who I have on the set today, let's kick that intro. Well. I'm introducing to some and presenting to others. Brother James in the building. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, man. I got no complaints, man. First and foremost, man, thank you so much for even considering me to be a part of your program, man. I really appreciate it.
Consider you, man. I appreciate you taking time out your busy day to come and hang out with me and sit
Yes,
and
sir.
talk for a few minutes, man. This is
Yes,
this is
sir.
it's been something that I actually had on my calendar for a minute, and then I
Yeah,
jumped into school, and I was like, let me put everything off until I'm actually able to be more focused and centered and everything's up. But I appreciate you pulling up.
yes,
So
sir.
I always have a weird, crazy story about how most of the guests pull up on my podcast, and so what happened was I came across you through somebody on TikTok. I can't even remember who it was. I think it was we were in K Shorts. I think you pulled up in K Shorts Live for
Mhm.
the first time, and we kind of made a connection from there. And then I reached
Yeah,
out to you. We had a couple of conversations. Then we started to develop and build this relationship. And then I
yes,
was like,
sir.
"Hey, I want you to pull up on my podcast." And he was like, "Yeah." And then we kind of did life happen, and
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
I was like, okay, let me make sure that I reach out and make sure that I get him on here because I know he has a wealth of information that
Yes,
the
sir.
people need to hear. I reached out to you, you said yes, and here we
Here we
are
are. Yes, sir.
right here, right
Yes,
now.
sir.
Man, this is going to be a great interview. I just think because you have such wealth of knowledge and and such a reach that you are reaching, that I think that this is going to really impact some men, and just hearing your story and give people the backside to who they what they see is they
Right.
see Brother James right here, right now, doing big things, but they don't see the journey of how you got
Right.
to where you wanted to get to. And my
Mhm.
hopes is that somebody connects with something along your journey that inspires them to keep moving forward. So
Right.
with that, that is um, that is the whole purpose of this. So you're doing good today. Hold on, give me a second. And this is why I love pre-recording, because now my phone decides the battery want to go dead. So we'll edit all this out.
Yes,
When,
sir.
when, when this airs, you won't even know none of this stuff happened. And let me see. Yep, got some juice. And cool. So how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great, man. Life is good, man. Like I said, I got no complaints. Things happen, but I got no complaints.
That's
Yes, sir.
and if we started to complain,
Hmm.
who would who actually wants to sit in a room with people complaining? Even
Oh,
other
yeah.
complainers kind of be like, hey, you
Yeah,
know,
and see, I used to be the chief complainer. And so I
really,
know how that feel, and I know how it is to suck the air out of the room. And so I decided I'm not gonna be that guy anymore. Yep,
man, you used to be
yep.
really?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Something was always wrong. Even though things are going well, something's always wrong. That was me. But the thing about it is, a lot of people tell me this. The fact that you're able to actually admit that, that's a start. So it took a while. The ego was in the way, but yeah, I was the problem. I'm not gonna lie, I was the problem.
But man,
Yeah.
I can't even fathom you being a complainer with all the positivity that you put out here.
Yes, sir.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
so speaking of terms of location, where are you currently at?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Yep.
Atlanta,
Atlanta,
Georgia.
Georgia. Yes,
He,
sir. Yep.
hey, he's in the A, y'all. He's one
Yep.
of the
Atlanta.
he's the hot Atlanta. Um, we was just there not too long ago.
Yeah.
For I think Memorial Day weekend, we were down there. We didn't get a chance to
Yeah.
connect because you were out, changing the world, doing big things up in New York
Yes,
and
sir.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
hanging
Yeah.
out with the fam. So next time
Mhm.
we're in Atlanta, definitely we got to connect and or
Exactly.
anytime you just want to pull up to Indiana and y'all want to come and hang out, man, you and your wife are more than welcome to come and hang out with us
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
up
Yes,
here
sir.
and just kind of see this slow country bumpkin living that we have up here in Indiana. So
Yes, sir.
yeah. So in your family track, as far as siblings, where do you fall at in the scale on um in that scale? All right.
I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest. We had discussed before in my biological family. Of course, it was five of us. Of course, my parents, and they have three sons, so they've all passed away. So I was the baby in that. Um, and then once I transitioned to my uncle, who I call my parents today, because I've been with them since I was 4 months old. Again, I'm the youngest. Yep,
Okay.
I'm the
So
youngest of
you're the
three.
youngest.
Yep.
You the youngest, and so growing. So that transition at 4 months old, and at what point was like? Let's kind of fast forward through probably like your eighth grade. You're 13, 14 years old, 12,
Mhm.
13, 14. Um, what was life like for you at that age?
I have to admit, because I grew up in a small town, Douglas, Georgia, not too far down from Savannah, and we had a good life. We really did. We had a good life. We had great parents. The community is great. We had our issues here and there, but all in all, it was really no crime there. We all got along. And I had a great childhood. I had a great childhood. I had a grandmother that really spoiled me to death. And so
Right.
that was a beautiful thing. So but yeah, growing up around that age and everything, I can't think of any issues that I had, other than, because I really was just growing into myself at that time. So I was really just out there just having fun. I've always dealt with a certain shyness about myself for whatever reason. But other than that, man, we had a great life. We really did. Yep.
That, and that's really cool that when you can look back on your childhood and realize like, man, it was really a decent childhood. And I look back, even
Hmm.
though I lived in the hood, came from the hood,
Hmm.
and was in a really bad neighborhood, but I had a good childhood.
Yep. Hmm.
Like I
Yep.
didn't miss out on things. And I think one of the best things that my dad did for me, um, I didn't know we was poor.
Right.
That's
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I had no idea that that
Yep.
that we was not out balling.
Yep.
I was kind of
Hmm.
ashamed of where I lived because of the neighborhood and the stigmatism that came along with that. But
Right.
I mean, when I look back, I'm like, man, I had a really good childhood. I had a
Yep.
really good
Mhm.
childhood.
Yep.
Yeah. So as you sitting around doing kid stuff, in high school, were you a good student? Were you did you accelerate in school, in sports? What was kind of your thing at a young age?
Yeah, well, I accelerated in sports. My biggest flaw at that age is I didn't pay attention a lot in class, and because I didn't pay attention a lot, because um, I um, I wouldn't necessarily say I got distracted. I was pretty much the distraction. Like I said, I was trying to be something that I wasn't, this class clown, and wasn't paying attention. And because I didn't, this is one of the reasons why I speak so passionately to a lot of young people. Because I didn't pay attention a lot, I was kept back in the 6th grade, and I was kept back in the 7th grade. And it wasn't until that second time till things just like click. Like, you can't continue doing this. You can't continue going down this path. And I watched my parents work so hard, and I watched my other siblings that was in our family. I saw them excel. And here I am, being this class clown, and it wasn't working for me. But I was great in sports. But one of the things I love about my teachers and my coaches back then, no matter how good I was in sports, if I wasn't doing anything academically, it was no pushing me through and stuff like that. So because I didn't make the grade, I suffered the consequences. But once that happened, once that was out of my system, then that's when things began to start rising. And I got better in sports. And so, but yeah, so I played all 3 sports that really kept me out of the streets. I played basketball, football, and I ran track. So that really kept me out of the streets. So as
Okay.
far as me getting in trouble, none of that. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I know it's kind of hard to kind of remember this, but so being held back 6th grade and 7th grade mean that you were 2 classes behind the people that you were actually in school with.
Yeah.
Like your classmates.
Yeah.
Now, did that have an effect on you? Were you teased? I know you said it caused you to lock in and really be like, yo, this ain't the right thing, but I know how kids are too.
Yeah.
We can be savages and brutal, and we can be piranhas, and
Right.
we can talk bad about you. Did any of that happen? And if it did it affect your self-esteem or your confidence as a young man?
Actually, it did. And I think that I'm glad you asked that question, because I think that is what made me wake up, because I got tired of getting teased about it. I'm watching people that I'm supposed to be in the same class with, and I'm watching them go on Excel, and I'm not doing that because I was doing the total opposite of what they were doing. It was a couple of us that pretty much did the same thing. We failed the same grades, and those were the ones I hung out with, and I still love them to this day. And but just the teasing and the different things. And yes, it did a lot to my self-esteem. It really did. Because anytime I got around those people, I felt like I didn't fit in. Because many of them didn't care, but then there was several of them that really, teased me about it. So whenever there was a discussion or argument or whatever like that, and even if I'm winning the argument, they bring that up. And so that brought my self-esteem down even lower. And no matter how much my parents encouraged me, which they always did, that really sat in the back of my mind how I was. And to answer your question, yeah, it did a lot to my self-esteem. But I look back on it, I did it to myself. Mm-hmm.
That probably over time just became an undercurrent of some other things as as an undercurrent. So now you get on track, 7th grade, 8th grade, you rocking and rolling. You're excelling at sports because you realize that the consequences of trying to be the class clown just wasn't paid. The wages of class clown wasn't beneficial.
Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
and so
Yep.
so as you are transitioning, now were your older brothers, did they pick on you when you was held back, or were they trying to encourage you like, little bro, hey,
Yeah.
get on, like, man, what are you doing? Or were they just kind
Yeah.
of like, we just big brothers and we ain't really paying no
Yeah.
attention to that?
No, they really encouraged me. It was never any teasing in the house. I never felt embarrassed at home. And of course, I had that conversation with my parents, of course. But when it came to my siblings, no, it was never. It was always encouraging. It was always, a sense of, you'll get them next time. It was always that. I never felt out of place. My self-esteem was always at its highest when I was in the house.
Okay.
It wasn't that I went outside the house, and kids do what we did what we did. Even when they messed up, I teased them as well. So,
Right.
but they've always, even unto this day, have always kept my sense of value up. So it was never a teasing at home.
I mean, that's that's a sign of just like great parenting, because
Yeah.
I know not only the outsiders, but I know how savage brothers and sisters can be. We can
Yeah.
be
Mhm.
because we want to get under your skin, so I know what to say and what to do
Yeah.
to be able to get
Yeah.
under your skin. So
Mhm.
so yeah, so now as you are transitioning in through high school, you know, were you still excelling in sports at this point? You know got yourself together with grades. You start to lock in. Now, what was like your biggest transition going from like this middle school thing? Now you're kind of moving, you're starting to matriculate in age. What was one of your biggest challenges? Because it seemed like at home life was stable, which has a
Mhm.
lot to do with the success of
Mhm.
of how we move because of a stable home life. But
Yeah.
the outside piece, was those influences still influencing you to kind of make decisions that didn't line up with who you felt that you were?
Yeah. I was still, that as far as my years that I did not excel, the years that I did not pass to the next grade, it followed me all the way through graduation. So it's died down just a little bit, but whenever I was in that circle with them, that conversation would come up. You're not in your right grade and stuff like that, but because I was really into sports and my coaches was just phenomenal. I really didn't have the time. I mean, I hung out and I played just like anybody else, but because I was so like, soon as football season was over, it's like the next day I was off to basketball practice.
Right.
Soon as the final game was over in basketball, I was off the track, and to track and field. So I never got a chance to really, absorb a lot of the stuff. But the whole, I guess we call it introvert now. That was a part of me a little bit because I stayed close to my parents, because with them I felt freedom. I
Mhm.
felt like I was somebody. But even the people in my community, I had a lot of friends. We all loved each other. And I didn't feel closed in. But when you're teased as a child, anytime you see one of them, even if they're not teasing you anymore, still when you see them, it brings back that thought. I never held a grudge against them, because to be honest with you, they were telling the truth. Even though it was kind of brutal to me, but they was telling the truth now that I look back on it now. But just because I was good at sports, so that kind of brought certain popularity. But in that, I became lost in that because football gave me a certain meaning. You know what I'm saying? It caused me to mask, that you and I talk about all the time. It caused me to mask what was really going on behind closed doors, or behind that mask. Hey, I wish I would have passed the sixth grade. I wish I would have passed the seventh grade. I'll be what they are right now. That still sat on me a lot. I never shared it with anyone, but it did sit on me. And because it sat on me, even in sports, I didn't excel like I should have.
Yeah,
Coaches gave me every
yeah.
opportunity, but I didn't. It sat on me. Yep.
Now, in that whole space, it seems like you had a positive, affirming male in the house. How
Hmm.
important do you believe that is to young people to have that positive male figure in the house?
Man, he supported me all the way, even to this day. He was there, whether I was basketball, football, track and fields. He was there, both of them. And it's so important because he taught me more by watching him than he taught me by the things that he told me. And he told me a lot, but the thing that I love so much about him is whatever he said he was going to do, he got it done. you know. And so growing up, you're going to remember that. You're going to see that. You're going to see someone who does what they say they're going to do. And so that was a major impact on me. And so I can talk about my mother, but my dad, because I can resonate with both males. But to just watch him do certain things, I felt like there was nothing he couldn't do. And so I even tell him to this day, he was my role model growing up. You know, and he's my role model even to this day. I pattern my life around him. And so and that kind of rubbed off on my oldest brother. My oldest brother lives down in Florida, and so I went and lived with him for a little while, and it was the same thing. Having that positive male role model in your life, man, that can transition no matter what mindset you have. When you have a positive male role model that has exceeded that stereotype or those
Mhm.
stigmas, or at least that's what they're showing you, man, that plays a major role in any young man's life.
Do you think that had you not had that, that you would have turned out a little different?
Yeah, when I finally found out about my biological parents, the only thing that I knew was when my mother passed when I was 4 months old, and my biological father decided, and we were living in St. Petersburg, Florida at the time. He contacted my grandmother, which was in Georgia. So my grandmother, aunt, and uncle, who I call my parents today, they all came and got me. When I found out about it, I was angry at first because I didn't know all the details. But
Mhm.
my dad, my biological father, knew if I had stayed in that environment, that I wouldn't have turned out very well, because it was drug infested, it was gangs everywhere, and he did not want me in that environment. So the best thing that he could have did was sent me to the people that raised me, because once he did, 4 years, once I got to the fourth grade, he passed away. And so um, he put me with someone, and I don't think that I will have the morals that I have today. Not saying, because I don't really know my biological father, so I can't say what type of man he was. But to send me with the ones that had raised me, I don't think I would have the morals that I have today if it wasn't for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a, I mean, like that's one, that's a mature thing on his part,
Hmm.
because he's seen the environment, and he probably knew a lifestyle that he was living that he didn't want
Yeah.
you to be a part of, and then he
Yeah.
seen something in over here that was like, those are some good people right there.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because the decision is, he could have chose to give you to some not so good family members.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
for him to be able to regardless of what his reasoning was, he
Yeah.
recognized that this over here is going to be the best situation, and that you were going to be able to thrive. And then your aunt and uncle receiving you saying, we have no problem, this is going to be the best situation for him,
Yeah.
and we're going to
Hmm.
raise him like he's ours. And
Yep.
that right there speaks volumes on the character and the nature of both parties involved. You know
Absolutely. Yeah.
that
Hmm.
and I can understand the being angry, because one of the first questions that most likely arises, and the question that I kind of deal with when I'm talking to young people in this
Hmm.
situation, it is, why didn't they want me?
Yeah. Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
what did I do that made them say that they don't want me anymore? And
Yeah.
so, so the fight internally becomes
Mhm.
this. Uh, I'm already at a disadvantage because I don't see, because they didn't value me enough to keep me. So
Yeah.
that must mean that I don't have value at all.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. That was the
And so,
mindset. Yeah.
yeah, and so then
Yeah.
that becomes the foundation and the undercurrent of everything that you do. And
Hmm.
and now you're basing all your success and all your things off of, they didn't want me. So no matter how
Yeah.
well I shine, that right here, and everybody's giving me accolades and pat me on the back, and I'm exceeding in certain things, but this right here is just a little crack that
Yeah.
says I'm not valued
Yep.
because
Hmm.
of this over here.
Yep. Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. It did, because with my biological parents, it was three of us, my two oldest brothers, and it was me. And I was given away. Well, I was, sent to live with my grandmother. So yeah, I grew up thinking, once I got a little older, okay, you kept both of my brothers. Why didn't you keep me? Not realizing that he was protecting me. But at the time, I wasn't thinking that. And so I grew up with that. I never shared it, with the family that raised me, my aunt and uncle. I never shared that with them, even to this day. Um, so I never shared that with them, but that's was some of the things that I carried along. Like, why was I not good enough? Why did you give me away? And so you think those things because you see other people that went through that. And so when they talk about that story, it resonates with you. And there were times I wasn't even thinking about that till I saw other people talking about it. Like when I talk to people who have been adopted and stuff like that, and I'm putting pieces together. You know how the brain works. I'm like, well, technically, I was adopted. If you
Right.
want to explain it that way, even as a kid, because I didn't know how to rationalize. I didn't know how to think that. I didn't have no critical thinking back then. I was just emotional thinker. And so I'm like, wow, you got a point there. Why didn't he keep me? I never knew him. I never knew my mother. And so so I went through that spiel. But the beauty of that is, my aunt and uncle was they kept things so, like I said, we didn't know what being broke, man. At least we didn't know. All
Right.
I know is I hit the switch, something happened. I opened the refrigerator, there you go. What I'm saying? And then, so we just had a lot of fun back then. So I really never thought about it. They really kept my mind off of it because the
Uh-huh.
love that they gave me was so phenomenal, man. And so I really never missed a beat until I was in a group and we talked about it. And I had the time to sit back and think like, well, yeah, he gave me away. But it was like, I just carried it. I just carried it, even though I didn't understand it. I still
Uh-huh.
carried it, realizing that this man did the best thing he could for me. He looked out for me, and didn't know at the time that God was working through that entire situation. And so
Right.
didn't know that at the time. But as I got older, it became clear, And so, but being angry with somebody and they're not here, so it's like you have no one to aim your anger at because they're not here. I couldn't confront him, because he had
Right.
already passed. So it was like a stuck situation, you
Did
know.
you take that? I'm glad you said that because did you take that anger and did you direct it towards other people?
I
Because if
believe
you
I,
came
yeah.
directly towards him, was it directed towards other people in how you moved or how you handled? Maybe it wasn't the anger where it was violent or
Mhm.
it made you really really aggressive, but did because it has nowhere to go. Like it's that energy, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
trying to send it somewhere. And it's like the wall, it keeps hitting the wall and it's coming back faster than
Yeah.
I'm sending it out. So I have to redirect it
Right.
somewhere.
Mhm.
Did it show up in other areas or did it or not even did it show up as anger, but did it show up as something else?
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, and that this is how I know that this is the divine order that you and I connected. Now I understand where it all come from just by telling my story. I felt like, even though I didn't know how to word it this way, I felt rejected. And
Mm,
so
that's the way.
anytime I would try to make friends with someone and they
Mhm.
wouldn't do it or they did me wrong, I felt rejected, you know? And so, of course, I did not resort to violence or anything like that, but I will hurt internally, you know? So that's why I grew up giving, giving, giving. And it wasn't that people was taking and running with it. They were just being themselves, you know? They never
Right.
signed up for what I wanted them to be, you know? And so when
Mhm.
they wouldn't accept what I was giving, I felt rejected. And that goes all the way back to, when that part of the story was told of my father, which I lack the understanding in that, but still that was my thought pattern that he rejected me. And it's amazing because I also during that time, I would say like, okay, he didn't want me. And so God, why did you not allow me to know who my mother was? I dealt with that, because she died when I was 4 months old. So I never knew her, And so that was another piece that really sat on the inside of me, But it was that rejection piece, So that kind of made me kind of like shy away from people because I didn't want to get too close,
It turned
because
you
I
into
felt
an
like,
introvert
yeah, yep,
and it
yep,
put you in a
mhm,
silo. So
yep,
instead of
hmm
so I mean that's really good. And I think a lot of people don't really understand like that you said that the anger translated into rejection. And
Mm-hmm.
then that rejection then caused you not to build sustainable relationships and
Yeah.
put you in a silo. And then you left to your own devices within that silo
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's all kind of stuff happening in the brain when you left
Yeah.
to your
Mm-hmm.
own your
Yeah.
own thought. And at this young age though, you know what I mean? Like we're talking what, 15, 16,
Yeah. Even younger than that,
or 14,
even,
15,
yeah,
yeah,
about I'll say around like I really started coming to the knowledge of it around I say around 12 years old. I didn't know how to gather my thoughts on it, but the thought was there. The thought was there. He didn't want me. And the sad part about that is even at that age, I remember I was out playing one day and some friends of mine came and said, "Hey, your brothers are down at your house." And I'm like, "Who?" And they said, "Your brothers from Florida," because they all knew about it. So I take off running. And I
uh-huh.
gets all the way down there and I see these two guys walk out the house looking like my twin. And they said, "Hey man, we'll be right back." And they never came back. And so that was another form of rejection. I'm like,
added,
why did yeah. Mm-hmm.
added
Yep.
another Lego to the
Yep.
rejection.
Yep.
Even
Mm-hmm.
though you were in a healthy environment and you was being received by your parents or your aunt
Yeah.
and your uncle, you were in a healthy environment, you were
Yeah.
thriving a little bit, but that added another Lego to the rejection that you were, because at 12, who know, I know it's all I'm talking just like you've come across a lot of people, right? And every once in a while, you'll come across that 12-year-old who's actually like 45. You know
Yep.
what I'm saying? And you sitting there having this
Yep.
conversation with this 12-year-old,
Yep.
like you had to be somebody else different because you having it, but most 12-year-olds are not like that
Yeah.
be able to sustain,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to process the thought, process the
Yeah.
emotions, process the feelings, and then articulate that in a
Yeah.
way that
Mm-hmm.
is an adult can really be like, yo, I can relate
Yeah.
to that. And then you isolate yourself, so you're probably not talking as much. Now, as you transition, you go through high school. What was one of your biggest takeaways from high school? What was the thing that impacted you the most in high school that changed the trajectory of where you were going? What was that thing that impacted you the most?
I think that the whole because like I said, I had a lot of friends, and anytime we got together, we loved on each other. We had a lot of fun together. So I knew I had the ability to connect with people. That was never an issue with me, even as a child. I didn't know it at the time, but my siblings and other grown-ups would tell me that. And so coming out of high school, I think the people around me in high school really gave me my confidence back. But it was still on me. I still didn't know how to process it. But just looking back, my coaches and everybody, like I say, the whole thing about, hey, you didn't pass 2 grades, that began to die down. That really died down. And so it was not an issue no more. And my confidence began to build up. And so, like I said, we had our issues here and there, but all in all, we loved on each other. And once I came out of high school, I was ready to go tackle the world. I was ready to go see what is James gonna become. And so I had a lot of support behind me, and that was a beautiful thing. So that's really what drives me today. And so, but and just like anything else, even though it fell off you, it never leaves. So if you're not careful, it'll come back. And how the scripture says, when the spirit the
When you
spirit leaves you, it comes
Yeah,
back. And it
10
brings
times
7 other
stronger.
demons. Oh man,
Yeah,
it came back hard.
yeah,
It came back as an adult. It came back real hard. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, they really by them accepting me, and I'm accepting them. That that took away a lot of the rejection I was feeling. But then because I did not work on it, it came back like a flood. So, but yeah,
yeah.
just coming away, they gave me my confidence back. I was ready to go tackle the world. I didn't believe that I couldn't do anything, and it's all because of the people that I went to school with and the relationships that we had.
Okay. So when you transitioned out, what was the move after high school? Did you go to college? Did you go into the workforce? Did you go military? What
Well,
was the step?
the two things was military and school. Those were the two things. But like I say, I got letters from different schools, and at the time I didn't know it, but I got letters from different schools. But my whole thing was, and my mom was correct. If you are not completely sold into this school in high school, what do you think you're going to do when you get to college when it's more and more serious, And I
Right.
can look back on that now and say, yeah, she made the right decision, because if I couldn't get in with a scholarship, the burden that I would have put on them, it would have been bad, because I looked at my older brother. He went on to college. The brother under him, he went to the Navy, and my sister, she went off to college. And so that's when my oldest brother came home one day, and he and his wife said, "Hey, how would you like to get out of here and just move to Atlanta with us and start a new life?" It's like, okay, cool, let's get it. And that's how it transitioned, because my dad had set me up where we were down in Dublin. He had already set me up with a job and everything. It was a great job he had set me up with. But he even said it himself, I think it'd be a good idea, even though the community was not bad community, but that I'm looking at back on it now, that familiarity, I had to get out of that
Yeah.
to go see something else.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. Hmm.
That small town mentality, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you have the one or two good jobs in the area, and everybody's goal is to graduate high school, get on at the plant or at the
yeah,
X, Y, and Z, and work there for 40 years.
yeah,
And if you just look how God just kind of ordained that
yeah,
the just the whole start of your life was transitional. Hey, you're gonna be able to transition. So it's easy for you to say, all right, to
yeah,
detach and say, you know what, I can pack up and go. Might be a little fearful, but that's good insight that they see, that like your brothers them saying, I know that there's more to offer outside of this. And
yeah,
normally what
hmm,
happens is that just becomes the world, right?
hmm,
Like we don't see
yeah,
beyond it. Like I live 15 minutes from Louisville, which is the
uh-huh,
city. I live on the
yeah,
Indiana side. There's
right,
people in Louisville that have never ventured off over here at all. And all it
right.
is a 15-minute ride across the bridge.
Wow, hmm,
Like so it's easy to get caught in a small that small town mentality. My wife is from Pontiac,
right,
Michigan. And the whole goal was to graduate and get on at Ford or
hmm,
GM or something up there and work for 40
yeah,
years. Never seen anything
yeah,
outside of that.
hmm,
So being able to be having somebody to escape,
yeah,
to come back and say, man, guess what? Where I live at, there's two Walmarts.
yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like just
yeah.
to give you a bigger perspective of things. So when you landed in the A, what was life like? How what did you do? What did you get into?
Well, it's amazing. When I got here, and in 80, at the beginning of 80, well, the end of 86, when I got here, I got a job real quick. I got a job real quick, and it was working at a fast food restaurant. But just to get up here and come from where I came from, and to come here, okay, Atlanta's this major city. I wasn't even, I would see New York and California on television, and but to come here to
Right.
actually live here in Atlanta was big for me, because because down in Douglas, Georgia, I had a certain vision, but when I come here, it's by being a bigger city, it's like, wow, and I was just, completely excited, but again, that whole rejection thing was still on me. Didn't know where it come from, and didn't really know where it come from until I just did your show. You know what I'm saying? So, and that was just revealed to me. So, and so, I still, when I got here, my brother, one of the things I love about both of them, he and his wife, they would put me in the car and they would drive me around the entire city. They would drive me in areas that was more wealthy than what they were living, because they were trying to give me
Uh-huh.
another vision. They wasn't saying, James, go out and get rich. They just wanted to give me a vision, you know, and that particularly down to what I did to my girls. So they would drive me around the city just to show me buildings and expensive homes and stuff like that. And they wouldn't say anything. We would just drive. And so I'm looking at these things like, wow, you know, like somebody actually live in that, you know, because I'm come from a small country town, you know, so I wasn't used to it. And so, but it was like, okay, right here now, the sky is pretty much the limit, you know. The sky's the limit, you know. And but the amazing thing about that is you can be in a place where there is just so much opportunity. There could be a wealth of opportunity. But if you're stuck on the inside of you, you'll never take advantage of it. Yep, you'll never take advantage because you feel like
That,
I can't go talk to
that's
her
good.
because I feel like she's gonna reject me. I can't go talk to him because I feel rejected. So that held on to me like an anchor, you know. And so, but yeah, I started working as soon as I started working and paying bills as soon as I got here, you know. And so that was instilled in me before I left home, you know. And so yeah, you know, so I started getting to know a lot of people, you know, made friends or whatever like that. And then, you know, it was like, okay, this is the life for me. I was a little homesick, so I would go back home a lot, but then after a while, I got settled in, I was good. Hmm.
So in that, it just seems like man, like how God had orchestrated your just the whole
Hmm.
vision, um, and not allowing you to settle for anything
Right.
less.
Yep. Hmm.
You know, like
Hmm.
so your dad seeing something that would have limited you. He put you in a
Hmm.
situation that caused you to grow to as much as you
Hmm.
could. Your parents see something that says, "Hey, it might be better for you to go off over
Hmm.
here and see something." Then your brother say, "I want you to see something else." So it was never you never got an opportunity to create a
Yep.
ceiling.
Nope. Nope.
Like
Never. Hmm.
like everybody kept moving the
Yep.
bar
Hmm.
so that the ceiling could and so God is saying, yeah, I because life is
Yep.
different the moment you create the
Yep.
ceiling.
Hmm.
Like you're not brother James if you don't if the ceiling is where the ceiling was in 86.
Yep.
You
Hmm.
know,
That's
if the
true.
ceiling was just Douglas, you probably went to the plant, did whatever the thing was, kind of did the thing, got married, had kids, raised your kids in the ceiling,
Yep. Yep.
you know.
Hmm.
So man, that is
Yep.
that's great how God
Yep.
orchestrated
Hmm.
your life to be able to um put those pieces
Yep.
together. So now you're in your 20s.
Hmm.
What was I mean, what was you experiencing in your 20s? I know you were still kind of dealing with the undertones of the
Hmm.
rejection and things like that, but were you thriving? Did you get married? What was life like in that in the next few years after because you didn't go to college, right?
Right.
You got into the
Hmm.
workforce. Okay,
Yep.
so you start to put pieces together,
Hmm.
start to build relationships, start to network.
Hmm.
Did you meet a woman? Did you get married? Did you have kids? What was the 20s, 30s like?
Yeah.
What was your experience? At what point did you break away from your brother and start to live on your own?
Well, my brother ended up moving to Florida because he ended up because he kept telling me that they may offer him a job in Florida, you know, and so once he left Atlanta, he went and he worked for NASA, you know, and he kept
Okay.
telling me that he believed that was coming. So when he was getting ready to go, my mother, on the other hand, she thought that once he and his wife left, that I was going to come back to Douglas, you know. But my brother was telling her, "No, I think he's ready. He's going to be okay." And so when he came and asked me, he already knew my answer, and I said, "No." I said, "I'll stay here." I didn't stay. I didn't stay because I didn't want to be under his roof. I stayed because yeah, I think I got this. Yes, I grew up in a small town. That's what I'm used to, but I think I got this. I think that between my parents and my brother and his wife, the upbringing or the philosophy was pretty much the same as far as morals and staying connected with God and stuff like that. So I was like, you know what? I said, I think I'll be okay. So he and his wife ended up transitioning to Florida, and I stayed here. I ended up getting a better job, and I was able to take care of myself. Honestly, in that span, once I was able to get a better job, I was making enough money back then to, it was like people just don't make this kind of money. And I look back on it now, it's not really a whole lot, but at that time, I'm like, okay, I'm no longer in the fast food chain, so now I'm
Right.
transitioning over to here, and I'm making a whole lot more money. So I had a whole lot more money at the end of the month, so I can pay my bills. And I remember I was living with some roommates, and I was making enough money so I could pay the bills for all of us, and it was just that good, and so but like I say, Brother Ball, it was still on me. It was still on me. That rejection, I would mess up relationships. The young
Okay.
lady didn't do anything to me, but that fear of her one day saying, I don't want this anymore, that stayed on me because I did run into a lot of women. And I look back on it now, James, your approach was all wrong. But I did run into a lot of women at that time that did reject me. So to preserve myself, I will break it off with them first, even though they haven't done anything to me. So I will break it off with them, or I'll go do something that wasn't right that will upset them, and so that still stayed on me, And so, coming from my father, my biological father, who actually helped me, but my understanding wasn't there, all the way up, and the layers and layers and layers of that, it pretty much kind of clouded it out,
Uh-huh.
as to where it come from, So, but still, I was, I had my own place, I was on my own, and I was just living. I was just living. I wish I would have. Looking back now, I wish I would have did more, but it is what it is. But yeah, I was just living. Yep. Hmm.
So did you have any serious relationships back then? I mean, because it seems like you got into self-sabotage, which is normal.
Yeah.
It happens. It's like
Hmm. Yeah.
hurt them before they hurt me, or get out of it
Yeah.
before I get hurt. Yeah,
Yeah.
self-preservation. So, did you have some serious relationships
Yeah,
prior?
I can remember one that lasted for a while, and she was good to me, and but my head was in the streets. My head
Okay.
was in the streets. I wasn't committing any crimes or anything like that, but my head was in the streets. The people I was hanging with, their head was in the streets. I can't say I was around the wrong crowd because I was part of that crowd, And so I
Right.
didn't I pretty much mistreated her. I really did. I pretty much mistreated her. It got to a point where I never could finish nothing. I start and I stop. I start and I quit. I start and think, okay, this is not going right. I'm feeling a little pull here. Okay, let me get out. That was me. And that was all the way up until I met my wife. So
Okay.
yeah, I had a serious relationship back then, but
So
yeah, it didn't, I
when you
messed
were
that up.
out in the streets, you out here wilding, doing street stuff,
Hmm.
and and just so that people can
Yeah.
understand, when we talk about street stuff, we not talking about, well, for the most part, because I've had some guys like, nah, I was in the streets like
Hmm.
ski mask and hoodies and all that other stuff. No, it's just a certain kind of lifestyle that you
Yeah.
lead that just means that you're not committed to
Yeah.
one thing at all across the board.
Mhm.
Maybe the only thing that you're
No.
committed to at
Mhm.
that time is work because it's supplying the
Yeah.
resource that you need to continue to stay in the streets. So
Hmm.
so don't think that brother you go pull up his criminal record and look at some stuff and be
Nah.
like he out here he done,
Yeah, no, it was
you
none of
know
that. Nah, it was none of that. But the funny part about this is, um, I was out there trying to be a player and I sucked at it. You know what I'm saying? I could because and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna tell you why. I wasn't the kind of guy to manipulate people.
uh,
That just wasn't me. But like I said, I hung around. The culture was
right.
get as many women as you can. Even when I was growing up as a kid, I always keep a woman on the side. And I think they were just telling me that to protect me. And so I'll be dating like two or three women, but in love with all three of them. So if you're trying to be a player, you like, okay, I'm gonna bring her over. You gotta leave it this time. No, I was sitting there whining and dying all three of them because that's what was in me. That's what was in me. It wasn't to manipulate somebody, but at the same time, I had to protect myself. And so I was living under this stigma. And so it was like I was getting caught every time. Every time I was getting caught. Like I said, it didn't end until I met my wife.
You cannot be in the game and be in love. Nah, not all.
You can't do it. Yeah, man. I'm telling all three of them I love them. That was the tragic part. And I was so wrong, man. I was so wrong, And I was like, this player game is not for me,
Yeah,
I'm terrible at it.
You got to have a certain kind of disconnect to be able to be in the game. And look, when you say love them and leave them, that's what Richard said. Love them.
Oh man. Ooh, if the word simp was out back then, oh yeah, I was a big one. I was a big one.
In his journey, like even in that experience, even in realizing like that life is really not for you, but you was doing it anyway. What was some of your takeaways from that?
Yeah. When somebody is showing you that they want to be with you, they're not giving you any inclination that they don't want to be with you. They're treating you well. And be mindful of that, cherish that, because even back then, I know we talk about relationships today, but even back then, relationship was very scarce back then, because the culture was get as many as you can. That was the culture, even like today, but my takeaway from all of that was, when you find somebody that's good, stick with them, Don't manipulate people, because even though you may feel like you're winning, you've hurt somebody in the process, because somebody gave you their heart. And because they gave you their heart, you feel as though that's an advantage because I'm going to get what I got, what I need to get, And so once I can trick her into getting what I got, I didn't think at the time what it did to her, And so, like I say, once I walked out, I slammed the door behind me. That was a wrap. So that's really what I took away.
And that's good. That's some good information. And here's the thing: you're saying something that was just culturally passed on. Like you're a few years older than me. We're in a different generation. You're a few years older than me. We're from two different places, but that have as many as you can was a universal rule.
Yeah.
That it was it was when I got married, I was asked, do I got side pieces? Because that's how marriage was defined in my family. Like you get married, you got about 2 or 3 other side pieces on the side. And I'm like, nah, like, no, that's not how this works. But you can see how culturally it's just been passed on, that it becomes a badge of honor for us. It becomes something that we can brag about. It becomes something that not only we don't even got to brag about it, because I'm just saying, like, my lifestyle, I wasn't telling them that I loved them, but I was getting the accolades and the pats on the back because of how they looked. You know what I mean? Like it was the whole validation kind of thing. And I tell people right now, you better be glad, especially if you got a daughter, that I'm teaching my son how to be better than the man that I am and to be the man that I was. Because if I was teaching him to be the man that I was, it's a different ball game. He out here, he wilding. I'll go get you a little 36, 40-year-old that, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I'm not teaching. It's a mindset shift that has to happen. And so then it becomes no longer the norm, right? It's no longer the norm. It becomes you doing that? Like, nah, I don't want to live like that. But most of us was raised in that vein. Most of us was raised to bag them and tag them, get as many numbers as you can, and pump your chest, and all that other
Yep.
stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Now, at
Yep.
what point did you? It sounds like you was raised in a godly family around godly people, but at what
Yep.
point did you really grab hold of the God piece of this?
I got. I'll be honest with you. I got tired. I got tired of the whole routine. I know it said raise up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they will not depart. I got to that point where I got tired, and I remember they asked Shaquille O'Neal about his divorce, and when they started to go in about the wife, Shaquille stopped them, and he said, "Nope, nope." He said she was great to me. She was great. I was the one that did all this. I can relate, even though they want my wives, but still I can
Right.
relate. I can relate to what he said. Um, it I just got tired. I got tired of the club scene. I just got tired. I got tired of going in there. It's like making cold calls
Right.
and sales. You know what I'm saying? At some point, you get
Right.
tired of hearing no. So then it got to the point where, and honestly, today I think all women are beautiful, but you have your pick. You have your pick of women, the look and everything. And so when that did not go well, you settled, you know? And so I think women go through it too, men go through it. And so I just got tired of the whole thing, man. I got tired of we'll date for a moment and then something happens, or I'm sitting in your house and a boyfriend show up and I didn't know you had a boyfriend. And
Right.
I got tired of all that. I just got and I went through that so many times. Dating a woman for, well, man, about 6 or 7 months, had no idea she was married. And so and I think that's what broke it right there. I'm just like, you know what, God, I am tired. I am tired. So honestly, I didn't go looking for a woman. I went looking for God. And somebody invited me to this church. And I went one time and I was hooked. I was completely hooked, and it's like this man stood up there and told my whole life, you know, and I'm sitting there looking at my brothers like, man, what did you say to him? We didn't say anything to him. And so because I didn't understand
Right.
what conviction meant then. And so I started that transition at that moment. It surprised a lot of my friends, like, we're going here. Do you want to go? Nah, I'm good, man. I'm home. I'm good,
Mhm.
man. I don't feel like going. And that was that started my transition. I was trying to get out of the streets. I was trying to get closer to God. That's where I was raised. That's who I knew my grandmother was, and the spirit of my grandmother was always on me. So I saw her do it all the time. I saw my dad going to church. All that started rushing back. And so I said, I'm just tired of doing this. I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, and it's like almost, well, I'm not gonna say cold turkey because you still dip your toe in the
Right.
water when you're curious. But all in all, that stuff started to slowly burn off of me. And then that's when I said, you know what? I want to be like my dad. And that's what did it. I want to be like him. I want what my parents got. And once I made that statement, I was hooked. I said, okay, I'm done. And I stopped. I
Yeah.
stopped. I said, I'm not doing it
That is
anymore.
that's awesome because
Yeah.
the thing is you got to test to see if it's real, if the conviction is real.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like I'm feeling
Yep.
it,
Mhm.
and I
Yep.
know that this is I'm moving in this direction, but let me stick my toe back in over here just in case this ain't the real
Yep.
deal. And then you realize,
Yep.
like, you know
Hmm.
what?
Yep.
I'm tired of
Hmm.
that. Like I don't, and
Yep.
that's where I got to that point where it's like
Yep.
it's not even appealing anymore. It's not even fun. I'm doing it because I'm a
Yep.
creature of
Hmm.
habit, and I hadn't replaced my habit yet,
Yep.
and I don't even know how to replace the habit. I
Hmm.
don't even know where to begin to replace the habit. But this ain't it
Yep.
anymore.
Hmm.
Yeah, I remember when I was in that space,
Yep.
and I was we used to go to this club all the time, and I remember this I was trying to talk to this girl. I was trying to talk to this young lady,
Hmm.
and and she said, "Didn't you have that on last week?" I was like,
Wow.
I think I'm out here stunting, and I'm out here got the same I got the same got the same clothes on. And I
right,
was just
right.
like, yeah, this club thing ain't it. Um, it ain't it.
Yeah,
This thing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So now you the
yeah.
transition. You figure that life wasn't the life for you. You are in a church. You starting to go. You starting to go hard. What was some of the things that you were you and I'm sure you were still kind of dealing with the undertones of the rejection and the isolation
Mm-hmm.
and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also dealing with, okay, I just hurt all these people. Now, what does that space look
Mm-hmm.
like when you're sitting there saying, I got the rejection on this end, and I got, I guess, guilt on this end, and you're in the middle of sitting in the
Yeah.
middle of between rejection and guilt. What
Yeah.
does that look like?
I didn't know how to. I guess I didn't know how to bring the two together to find a solution. I didn't know how. I still felt rejected, and even when I transitioned into the church and going back to my father, I tried to make my pastor feel that void, even though I did have a man that filled that void, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know it at the time. And so whenever I would feel a little rejection in the church, I would go and dip my toe again out there in where I was, but at the same time, I hated myself
Mm-hmm.
for it, you know. And so I'm trying to understand this, and I guess I remember one time, man, I was doing this, and we were at the park. I think it was during, I think back when Freaknik used to be here, and we was out there, man. All of us was, we was high, whatever, like that, and the guys I was with, they have a way of approaching women that, I don't approach women like that. I don't scream a girl's name across the street. That's not me. I've never done that. But I'm trying to mimic them, you know? And so when these women walked by and I said something, this girl gave me a look like like I had on filthy rags, you know. She gave me this look because I was
Uh-huh.
being disrespectful. And the look she get this, I mean, we used to call it the
Yeah,
stank
yeah.
face, you know. She gave me this look, and I'm telling you, it ruined my entire night. And it was daylight when that happened. That right there, that look stayed on me. It stayed on me. I mean, that was the rejection. I don't know why it was her, because it's not like I've never seen that before. But it was that day that it really, really hit me hard, to the point where it almost brought tears to my eyes, because not because of what but the layers that was
Yeah.
on me, leading up to that moment. And it's like the only time that I felt peace and my family wasn't there was when I was home alone. It was just me and God. And I would talk to God. And, we talked about that space where you get angry
Yeah.
with God when you don't know. So I'm at home having this yelling match with God, screaming at the top of my voice. And it was as though God, when I was done, I was tired, I was exhausted. I sat down and, like your parents always say, "Are you done?" That's the way it felt. Like God was like, "Okay, I hear you. Are you done? You have anything else?" Because with all that yelling, nothing changed. You know what I'm saying? Then, because in that state, God knew I couldn't hear him. And looking back on it now, so it was like, okay, Lord, I'm tired of feeling like this. Can I somehow bring this together, because I don't like what I'm doing, but the hurt and the pain that I'm feeling for doing this to someone, or doing this to people, or doing it to you, but the rejection, it's kind of like the weight was going back and forth, back and forth. One minute the rejection was heavier than the guilt I was feeling for doing people wrong. It was just like a
Uh-huh.
yo-yo. It's like a slinky toy, and and pretty much, like I said, that stayed on me. But then eventually the guilt I was feeling outweighed the rejection, you know, because I guess I looked at it as, my dad always told me, always look at the pros and cons of everything. He always tell me that, look at the pros and cons. And so he didn't say pros and cons back then, but he says it now. But I started looking at, okay, I sit back and I think about it. I look over here and I look over there, and I was like, you know what? I'm choosing this side over here. So even though that rejection is still on me, I'm just gonna stuff it right here, and I'm just gonna go over here. That's pretty much my
Okay.
mentality. Yep.
Okay. And so as you're walking it through this, you are figuring this out, you are shedding the layers, you are growing, you're realizing that the things that you were connected to just really wasn't really rocking with how you were. You start to detach from those group of friends and started to go over here, start to grow different. And you're at this intersection of how do I bring the guilt and the rejection together so I can resolve it. You start to move in that. At what point did
Mhm.
you meet your wife? Because y'all been married how long?
It was one of those nights when we were married 28 years. 20, we'll be
20,
29
okay,
years this year.
29 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And how old are
hmm
you?
So I'm 50. I'm 58. I'll be
So
59
y'all
in
you
December.
met her when you were 29.
Yep. Yeah, I met her like 29. Yep, 28, 29. Yep, that's when I met her.
Okay.
Um, Again, it was one of those things where I decided to go and dip my toe again, and I actually met a woman when I got out of the club. I let my roommates convince me, come on, man, come with us, come with us, come with us, come with us. Okay, man, I go. And so I went and I met this young lady from Detroit, at a club one night. And that turned into a long distance relationship. Really didn't work out. Um, so then one night I'm on the bed again, toe still in the water. I come home, I'm on the bed, and I'm drunk and laying. I always say, man, when you're drunk, man, don't ever look up at the ceiling. I'm laying on the bed. The
Just
ceiling is
spinning.
just spinning around, and yeah, and I'm like, God, I'm tired. I said, I'm tired. I'll never forget the prayer. I said, Lord, I know I shouldn't be talking to you in this state. I said, but I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I want what my parents got. And I'll never forget that. I got up, went to bed and everything, got up the next day. They wanted to go back out. I didn't go. Everybody hung out. I stayed home. 2 weeks later at work, I met my wife. 2 weeks later. And I'm not going to lie, man. I was like, when I saw her, I'm like, wow, God, you really took your time on her. That was mine. And then that's what I told my parents. That's what I told my parents. I said, no. I said, God took his time with her. That's what I'm saying to my parents, right? So I met her at work, and she was walking by. And I had already saw her because the department I was working in, I was over that department. So once we're done for the week, we had to turn all the paperwork in. So I go across to her department, turn them into the office, do the count and everything. And I happened to look through the window and I saw her, and that's how it all started. But really, it was her that was really more. She was more proactive in this relationship in the beginning, as far as she and I getting together, because that rejection was still there. It was still there, and she noticed it. She'll be on one side of the building, and I come out of the building knowing to get back to where I need to go. I can walk through there and pass her. Instead, I go the other way and go around the entire building. And she noticed that. She noticed that even when I came over there. So that rejection was still there. And I wish I knew the words back then, but it all worked out, the way it's supposed to. But yeah, that was the moment that I met her, and then that's when we began to. But she saw all of the issues that was on me. She saw it all. So
And so
yeah.
y'all meet, y'all going through what was your process like in the first few years of you still trying to you had an example,
Mhm.
so you knew what
Yeah.
it was supposed to look like, but you hadn't
hmm
really experienced it because just coming out of a lifestyle, getting into this lifestyle. What was
Yeah.
some of your hurdles at the beginning that that um that could have caused y'all to go y'all separate ways?
I was always the guy, like I said earlier, if it gets too hard, I'm leaving. I'm gonna find some kind of way to sabotage it. And I was doing it unconsciously. Well, now I'm not with a girl, I'm with a woman. Okay. So the first time, it was this argument, pretty much I initiated them. And because I was like, nah, man. In my mind, I was saying to myself, there is no way that a woman that looks this good could want a man like me. I had low self-esteem, I had a low self-image. I didn't see what she saw, you know. And so I remember one day I decided, I said, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. And she told me, you walk out that door, don't come back. And she meant it. That's what I needed. Okay. That's what I needed. And the feelings I had for her, was so strong till I didn't leave because I knew she meant it. And so from that point, I said, you know what? Here I am again with somebody that actually wants to be with me, who's not judging me, but actually wants me to get better, is willing to fill in the gaps that I have. She see the gaps. She's willing to fill it in. I'm not going to mess this up because now I'm older. Okay. So I'm a little wiser now. So I'll never forget at my church, a friend of mine came and said, hey, man, we going to Birmingham, Alabama to this manpower conference. You want to go? I said, man, but he said, yeah, TD Jakes. And at the time I know, I was like, who is that? And then they showed me a video, they told me about it and I saw him on television. I said, okay. And then that was the first time I met, well, I didn't meet him, Les Brown. And so I said, of course, yeah, we can go. And so we went, and that was the greatest experience I ever had in my life because I've never been in that huge of a setting to hear this. And it was something that, and I'm going to be honest with you, the biggest impact that I got at that conference was Les Brown. He played the biggest role on my change during that time because he made a statement. He said, you don't get in life what you want, you get in life what you are. And that stuck with me. I mean, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. And when he was telling his story, I was able to relate. And I was like, wow. And that's when I coined the term, you're better than you think you are. Okay. Because I kept hearing that. And so I took that and I heard Chuck D say one time, he said, was it Chuck D? I think it was. I think it was Chuck D. He said, when you hear something good, take it and apply it to yourself. Because if you don't, it will disappear just as quick as it came. Out of sight, out of mind. It started to make sense. It started to make sense to me then. And so from that point on, that's where it started. So it's like the first 5 years of our marriage, I went to like 4 or 5 different men's conferences every year. And I was looking for answers. I wasn't in love with the fame of the actual pastor.
Right.
I was looking for answers. Yeah, and I felt like that man had those answers I was looking for, And so I was so in love with the information that they was giving, and I kept tuning in. And for the first 5 years, I did that every year. I went to DC. We went out to New Orleans. We went to different places. Most of the conferences were here in Atlanta. And so I would start in like March and I would end my last conference in December. Wherever there was a men's conference, I don't even know who the pastor is. Never seen him before in my life, but his billboard said men's conference.
Right.
So I'm going. You know what I'm saying? I'm going. So that's what I did.
Okay.
Yep.
What year did y'all get married? Let's say 29 years. We're in 90?
Yeah, we got married in 90,
96?
I think 96.
Okay.
I think it was 96.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
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 96. Man.
Yeah.
And so you on the circuit going to the man conference. I actually have a similar. I kind of was I came across right before I met my wife. There was I think it was either I think it was a Manpower, and I think it was in Atlanta, and I think my wife's pastor was part of it. Claude Alexander out of the park in Charlotte. And so I was familiar with him, but everybody else I really wasn't familiar with because I grew up on a different circuit. Like I was more attached to white pastors and things like that. So it's it's two different two different things.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I ended up,
yeah. That's how it
yeah,
was
so
when I
I,
was
I
growing
was
up.
in,
Yeah.
I was
Yep.
like, so I
Yep.
came across that same thing and started to hit the conference things too, just because it was like
Yeah.
when I got
hmm
saved, I didn't care what was going on at the church. I just needed to be there. I ain't care if it was baby
Yep.
ministry, women ministry. I don't care what it was. I just needed to
Yep.
be around
hmm
people who was going hard after
Yep.
God. And that's when
Yep.
you know that
hmm
that thing is real, because you want to be in the space of people that are going hard
Yeah.
after God. How much do you think that that
hmm
changed and transformed your approach towards being married, and or no, being a man who happened to be married?
hmm because I was hearing so many success stories at these men's conferences, because many of them was like, sometimes, you could be in a big stadium, then there were men's conferences where it was only like 20 of us in there in a small room, and I was invited out, and just the nuggets that was in there. I remember the movie Malcolm X, when Malcolm stood up
Yeah.
and raised his hand. That was me. That was me. If you weren't clear, I'm like, okay, I know I can't do this at a big conference, but I was like, but that hunger drove me, because I'll never forget when the guy was asking questions, I kept my hand up. He finally came over, and I was asking him about, because he made a statement. He said, "When a woman gets in her mood," I'm like, what does that mean? I'm like, and I threw my hand up, and I was like, when you say when a woman gets in her mood, what does that mean? And he was like, "How long you been married?" I said, 2 years. He said, "Oh, you still on your honeymoon?" And everybody in there laughed, everybody in there laughed. But at that point, I was like, yeah, the rejection was still on me. But at that point, I'm like, okay. And the reason why I was like that, because at that point, let me back up a little bit. When it came to me making that transition over, I was down at 5 points. Never forget this. And I ran into a bunch of brothers who was of the Nation of Islam. Now, I've never been to a mosque, never joined Nation of Islam. I've always been a follower of Christ. But what was interesting about that conversation, they started talking about, and it was a little bit further back. They started talking about, Frederick Douglass, all the different leaders of the past. I had no idea who these people were. They talked about Malcolm. I had no idea who these people were. I'm like, who? They looking at me like, what? I'm like, I have no idea who you're talking about. You were talking about Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey. I had no idea who these people were. I wasn't raised like that. And they said, well, who do you know? And I said, Dr. King. And they was like, yeah, of course. And so they gave me these books to read. And so I began to read these books to understand, going back to slavery and everything. I really didn't know a lot about it. It turned me the wrong way until I met another brother who taught me how to harness, what I was feeling. And a lot of them walked away from me because I never would let go of Christ. But I was hungry for information. So by the time I got to that conference and he said, you still in the honeymoon stage. And I'm like, okay, if God put you on that stage and you're supposed to be somebody, and you open this up for discussion, and I ask you a question, you mean to tell me you can't answer? That was my attitude. I didn't say it to him. I even shook his hand after it was over, because I'm still not rude. I'm not a rude person. If I had a conversation with him, I would have had that
Right.
off,
Right.
away from, but it was like I was stern for information. So, I came home and asked my wife, I said, what do you mean by you all in y'all moods? And my wife began to talk about it. She began to talk about what women go through. Of questions I asked my wife, I certainly not gonna ask my mother. You know, those was just too, no, I'm not gonna ask my mother, okay, every month you have no, I'm not gonna ask my mother that, So my wife began to talk to me because my wife was a hairstylist. So she began to talk to me and about what women go through and everything. And like a student, I sat there and listened. All that did was fuel me, you know. And Dr. Ball, it was like, man, I was so like driven for knowledge. I was just driven for it. And so And I think what connected me so hard, even though Christ is our Savior, Paul connected me. You know, I got so I wanted to know I want to know how tall Paul was, what color was his eyes, and all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? It was maddening, man. I mean, I'm like, I would read his books over and over and over and over again, you know, until someone stopped me one day and said, "Hey, go read the four gospels, then come back to Paul." You know, so that's really what and by that time it was I was
Oh, you
for
locked
Christ at
in.
that moment, you
You
know.
was, and
I
so
was
I
locked
mean, so
in.
your story, like we have a lot of similarities. I got married when I was 29 too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Um,
Mm-hmm.
you said something else that, and my wife was a hairstylist as well. Yeah, so
Right. Right.
we have
Mm-hmm.
some
Yeah.
parallels
Yeah.
going on
Oh yeah.
here. I was
Yeah.
hungry for just like you. I
Mm-hmm.
was reading about 5 books a month. I was I was I was
Woo-hoo.
devout because I lived so wrong so long, and I and and here's the
Yep.
thing about
Mm-hmm.
information. Information has always been readable. It's always been there, right? Like everything that you were
Yep.
picking
Mm-hmm.
up wasn't
Yep.
like it just landed there. It's been there. But in the
Right.
lifestyles that we even
Yep.
today, think about all the information that you're currently
Mm-hmm.
putting out, right? It now it's just
Yep.
cataloged better. Oh, and they can find it on TikTok, they can
Yep.
find it on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, you find it on YouTube, the access to
Yep.
it. But my life didn't line up to the information because my life was telling me I needed other
Right.
information. I need I need information over
Yep.
here. So
Mm-hmm.
all this information right
Yep.
here that's already been here, when I got access to it, I'm just like you. I'm just sticking my
Mm-hmm.
straw in that thing and just give me another one. Give
Yep.
me another one. Give me another one. And
Yep.
so
That's it.
I was
Yep.
hungry for, and you know the funny thing is, and you said this the other day too. I am circling back around to the hunger for information.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been walking with God for
Yep.
26 years, and and
Mm-hmm.
I've been going. I got saved once. It was not. I didn't double dutch this thing. I wasn't back and forth for this thing.
Mm-hmm.
No, I showed up and I got in and been going hard ever since. And now it's like God is circling
That's
me
it,
back
man.
around to a bunch of my foundational
Yep.
principles that allowed me to sustain
Yep. Mm-hmm.
off of the first five. My first 5 years in this walk has been sustained in the last 20. So
Yep.
so
Wow.
and he's
Mm-hmm.
getting me back to the fill up your tank because I filled up so many tanks in a short period of time.
Yep.
I was just I was like, I don't know when this thing gonna run out.
Yep.
We just gonna keep flowing, and it's like the oil when she said, you know, it just kept flowing out and it kept flowing out, and she kept filling up jars, and
Yep.
she had jars
Mm-hmm.
of things to fill. And so
Yep.
I feel that. And so now, so you've been married, you are becoming this husband, um, and then you become a dad. What was the
Yeah.
what was that like? What was that transition like?
Yeah. It was a game changer because when I met my wife, she had a daughter from a previous marriage,
Mhm.
and she was 7 years old, and so there was no stepdaughter in this. We immediately connected. You know, I never forget one time we was at work and I was serious. This is when I really got serious about her. She was messing with me one day because they was getting ready to go home early. She was like, "Wow," she said, "if you were getting off right now, I'll let you take me shopping." And I told her, I said, "Well, if I'm taking you shopping, you staying the whole weekend." And she said, "I can't stay the whole weekend because I have a daughter." And I said, "Hey, bring your daughter. We're not going to be doing anything she can't see." And my wife told me that's what locked her in right there because she knew I meant that. And so, but as we went on, when I had a daughter of my own, Dr. Ball, that was I never asked God for anything else. That was it. That was it. Even to this day, I tell God, you've done enough. The only prayer I have today is, Lord, take care of my wife. That's it. Now, this journey that I'm on, Father, I'm on this journey because you put me on this journey. The resources you give me is for this journey. And so I have friends of mine, when I tell them, I say, well, my life is not mine anymore. They don't understand it. And I mean that. Material things just don't impress me. It doesn't. I'm happy for you. You got you a Rolls Royce.
Right.
Hey, come on, pick me up. You know what I'm saying? But it doesn't,
Right.
Dr. Ball, it doesn't fulfill me because I've tried it. I get it, and
Right.
I still feel empty. It looks good, and I love to see people prosper. I love to see people prosper. And my wife told me when we got married, every year we should grow, whether between us or our finances or everywhere, we should grow at least. We should look back on the previous year and say, hey, we're going to do better this year. Regardless of how, if 2024 was very successful, let's have even better 2025. That was her philosophy back when we got married. That's what we're still doing today. So once we had our youngest daughter, that I gave my entire listen. I checked out on life. I really did. I checked out on life. My whole focus was being a father and a husband. That was it. I checked out. You know, it was like by the time I came to, the world had changed because I was so focused on my daughter because I felt like, God, you gave her to me, you know? And so
Uh,
once that was it was like I have birthdays and I don't mind people doing anything for me. I have no issue with that. That's just not me. But it's like my attitude is like, God, you gave me 26 years ago, you gave me this young girl. You gave me my oldest daughter. You gave me someone to raise. So I poured into someone that did not biologically belong to me, and I poured just as much in her as I poured in my daughter that did come from me. Just like when I was transitioned as a child to someone else that was not mine biologically, but my uncle poured into me just as much as they poured into their kids. You know, and so I just repeated the cycle. But that
full
yeah,
circle.
full circle, full circle. So
Man, that
once she was born, Dr. Ball, my life just changed. It changed. My wife and I, we hang out together, we hang together, and it's amazing how you can hang with somebody every day and not get tired of them. Through the whole COVID thing, even though I still had to work, but through the whole it was never a strain on our marriage. And once I began to transition mentally, everything became intentional. I start running into men like you, and I would hear their story, and every time I would pull something from it. So that's why I said, well, no matter what setting I'm in, something is going to be said that's going to redirect me because I could be going this way, and I need to be redirected. So anytime you and I are on the same platform, and I tell you this all the time, you always say something that just changed my whole perspective. And I'm like, you know what, man? I'm tired of being around you. You know what I'm saying? You know, every time, I think I got it. Here you come. So didn't know where it all started. I didn't know. Didn't even think to look for it. I come on here, now I know where it started. And I'm like, and I'm sitting on here holding back tears as I'm talking to you. And it was like while you was talking, it was like the weight was just coming off me. And I was like, wow, I found it. It's like while you was talking, it was like a woosah in me. Like that's where it started. I never thought about that, man. So man, I really thank God for you, brother. I really do. I really do.
man, I am
Yes, sir.
honored. I am honored. Got me over here getting ready
Yeah,
to.
man.
We two grown men over here just being back, just crying.
Exactly, bro. I was holding it
But
back,
let,
man.
let me tell y'all,
Yeah.
hey, and it's okay to cry
Yep.
as a
Yep.
man. We not those guys.
Yep.
We not the tough guys. So if you hear this story and it touches you and you got to cry as a
That's
man,
right.
it is very okay to do
That's it.
so. We are okay with being crying.
Yep.
We are no longer back in the tough guy kind of
Nah,
thing. So so your baby girls is 26,
mhm.
and your other daughter is
Yep.
33, and so you got 2 weddings that you're gonna have to pay
Yep.
for.
Yep.
Man,
Exactly.
I'm glad I got a son.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
All we gotta pay
Yeah,
for is the dinner
yeah.
the night
I
before.
tease them all the
Man,
time. I say, you know what? I said, God got a good sense of humor. I tease them all the time, but yeah, man, I wouldn't have it any other way, man. Yep. Yep.
but that is awesome. So now we're here. We're where you are. Um, what are some of the things that you're currently working on now? How did you land into the space of talking to men? And what are some of the things you're currently working on?
Well, I was always invited to speak to a group of men. Either I remember I read a quote by Whitney Young. He says, "It's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared." I would show up somewhere, maybe the speaker wasn't there or a speaker, someone there knew me who invited me out. They knew the person in charge. Hey, let this guy speak. So it was things like that, but I remember the
Okay.
pain and the hurt that I went through as a child growing up, but because of all the fun that I was having, I was able to suppress a lot of that and it didn't come out until my adulthood. And so as I got older, so my question was, okay, how many men, how many other men are actually going through this? So we started going through this whole thing about modern women and stuff like that. I was always against it. There was some truth in there, but it didn't apply to all women. But I started noticing something. I'm like, look, I started noticing how I was sitting in circles, and I'll never forget this. We were sitting in a circle one day, and all of us was talking about what we went through. And in my head, I'm like, dude, back then when I was dealing with all that, I cried like a baby. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like that was in my head. I'm like, no, I'm not doing this no more. Okay, I understand what we're saying. How do we get out of this? How do we walk away from this? How do we do it? How do it's gonna always be on us. My grandmother been dead for years, but the memory of her will always sit here. So that's what started my journey, and I'll never forget. One day I was cleaning the car, and as I'm washing the car, I was at work. I'm washing the car, and all of a sudden, a thought hit me. Just as like it was somebody standing over my shoulder, and that word was "gather my men." And I stood up, and my coworker was on the other side, and it's amazing. He was a white guy. It was amazing the impact you have on people. He and I was real close. I stood up and I stopped working. I was like, and the amazing thing is, he stood up and looked at me and he said, "What did he say?" I said, "What?" He said, "What did he say?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Whoever it was that just spoke to you." And I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? I'm like, all I heard was gather my men. He said, "Okay, do it." And went back to work. That was the last we talked about it. And I was like, okay. So I kept running from it, kept running from it, kept running from it. I can't just go gather men. I can't. I'll leave women out. What am I doing here? But it stayed on me, stayed on me, stayed on me, stayed on me, just constantly stayed on me. And so that's when I did. I said, you know what? Let me just do it. So I created a nonprofit organization called Project Men United. And we started going to, different communities, doing community service and stuff like that. We amassed a large following, and we was just going out feeding the homeless, and we would have our intersections, and we'd talk about men. We'd have different conferences. I invite other speakers that we were familiar with. They would come aboard and they would speak. But the problem was there was certain people that shouldn't have been in the leadership position. But it was there for a little while. But like I always say, you can't reach back and grab friends because they can't carry the weight that duty that God has given you. They can't carry the weight. Even though today we're still great friends. But it wasn't
Right.
for I'm driven after Christ, not so much the cause. Christ comes before the cause. And so I think that's what broke it up. So we stopped for a little while, gathered everything together, and then I started back. And so now
Mhm.
I'm still on that. I'm rebuilding the ministry right now. So I'm getting a few things I've changed the name and everything. Got different logos. I've written I got a charter and everything. And so right now everything is just in motion. And so now I'm getting
Okay.
ready to present all of this, and I just said, God, whoever you send, great. But until then, I'm just gonna keep walking. So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, let me know if you need me to pull up in Atlanta.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, because
Seriously,
like I told you,
like
I had a dream. You was walking through a doorway. I'll never forget this. I'm dreaming, and you were walking through, and I woke up and told my wife. The next night, you said, "Hey, brother, God told me to reach out to you." I'm like, "Come on," and I'm like, "If that's what He said, I believe Him." You know what I'm saying? So I didn't fight it. There was no resistance at all. I said, "Okay, Lord, let it happen." That's what I said. So, like I said, now, like I said, I'm putting things together now. I once had a podcast just like this. I still got my equipment. It's just a matter of just start doing it again. And so I just said, okay, I have a platform, just do it on the platform. So I started back in COVID, and this is why I was able to amass a lot of, a large following. So whenever my live
yeah,
comes on my lives, I pretty much empower all people, men and women,
right,
but I
right.
know
This is
in certain
yeah,
spaces, I have to speak to men subliminally because I get a lot of pushback, from a lot of people, especially when it's not my platform, so that's cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, so whenever you decide to launch your
Hmm.
podcast, we'll talk
Yeah.
offline about
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I got you on that.
Absolutely.
So check this out, y'all. Yeah, he downplaying how he moves out of these streets, yo. I'm gonna tell you, like he out here now. I I I mean, I love the meekness and the humbleness and all the good stuff because it ain't about the stuff,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it's zero about the stuff.
Right.
But let me tell you right now. Let me tell you right. I can show you better than I can tell you. Y'all need to go follow him on TikTok.
Yeah.
Go follow him on TikTok. I know that y'all see that number right there, right? That's almost 300,000 people that he's impacting.
Hmm.
Almost 300,000 people, y'all. Like, think about that. That number is amazing. Like, it ain't about him trying to gain the followers. It's about the impact and the change that he's bringing in over almost 300,000 people. Y'all need to go follow him. Let's go ahead and get him over to 300,000 just because he has an amazing content. He got stuff going on. He's empowering men. He speaks on when I hear him speak about men, he speaks so passionately
Hmm.
about empowering men. So y'all need to go follow him. But he ain't say nothing about this, but I'm gonna say something about it. He's also an author. He out here writing books, y'all. And y'all need to go cop the book. I bought the book. I was thinking that I was gonna get the hard copy, so I gotta order it through Amazon on to get the hard copy. But I do have the paperback copy, the reset 30-day reset. Y'all need to get this book and read it so you can hit the reset
That's
button.
right.
Come on, it's on Amazon, and look, you can get it. It just jump in. It's $25. It's nothing for the information that is in this book. Y'all need to, and here you go. If you want some more of his links, jump on his LinkedIn. You can get all connect to him on all his social media platforms and everything from from his link tree, y'all. I I'm gonna tell y'all, Brother James is out here doing some amazing things. And he said at the beginning that he's honored to be sitting here with me. Nah, the honor is mine to have you
Yes, sir.
on my platform to share your
Yes,
story
sir.
and your journey, and I am blessed. But I have one last question that I want to ask you. What is something that you didn't pay attention to early on that you had to learn the hard way uh, as you got older?
I learned something that I didn't pay attention to. Always, it goes back to Whitney Young. It's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. There were several opportunities that was offered to me as a young man, but because I was not in that headspace, now I understand when people say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Always, number one, God gave me my purpose, okay? And as we move forward, different information is dropped every so often. So you pretty much get an idea. You really don't know, but you pretty much get an idea of where you're going. Start preparing now. Start preparing now. Because I've ran into so many situations where I was offered something and I wasn't ready to receive it. And God had already laid it on my heart and I didn't move on it. So whenever something is laid on your heart, go ahead and start preparing. Go ahead and start preparing, because the things that was laid on my heart, and here's the mistake that I made. The things that was laid on my heart, I was looking at these things as it's going to bring me glory instead of bringing God glory.
Right.
And so when I was able to get out of that headspace, and start rethinking and resetting the way that I think, now when something drops, it's to his glory. Because God is going to take care of us. That's given. That's a given.
Right.
God has taken care of me since the day I came out of my mother's womb up until now. So I can relate to Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah. I can relate to that because God has always been there for me. Good times and the bad time, God has always made his presence known, even when I was wilding out, So always keep yourself prepared. Always keep yourself prepared, because when opportunity comes, it's like a surfer that waits on that wave. Once that wave comes, you got to catch it right there. If not, it's not that it won't come back, but it may be years later before you see it again.
Right.
So the thing I would say is, always get yourself prepared. Whatever God is telling us to do, go ahead and get in that space. Because the one thing that all of us wants to hear when all this is over, you did well, my good and faithful servant.
Absolutely.
That's what we want to hear.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Man.
Yep.
Boy, this was fun for me. This was some good.
Yes,
This was
sir.
good for my soul. You got anything
Yes,
else
sir.
you want to say to the people before we get up out of here?
Yeah, just don't live within the context of someone else's opinion of you. There is something about you that you haven't discovered yet. I went through the entire thing. Every time that I was challenged, I stopped, but didn't realize that the challenge is what brought the best out of me. I think it was Jim Rohn that said, "It's not about the goal; it's about what you become in the process of reaching that goal." So don't ever think less of yourself because someone else does. Give yourself a chance. Believe in yourself because God does. And if God believes in you, we have no choice but to believe in ourselves. That's something I'll leave it right there.
That's good stuff.
Yes, sir.
So hey, look, y'all, don't fit in somebody else's box about how they think you should move and navigate. That's really what he said. Don't let somebody else write your story and frame you in things that's smaller than what you're able. Then they're going to put you in a box that you fit in when you are way bigger than the box that they put you in. He said, don't do that. Hey, look, it's been great. It's been a great conversation. Hey, you've been chilling with your boy, C. Maurice Ball and brother James. I love you like a play cousin. I'm out. Peace.